run your wrist across it, and all of a sudden it kind of like drawed the picture towards your wrist. That's what would happen.
Well, if I ever run across one of those at Value Village one day, I'll plug that thing in and see what happens. That would be a fascinating experiment. And there's one other issue, too, that we need to add to the mix was the fact that my steel-toed shoes were highly magnetized. Still are. Actually,
I'm going to backtrack. Which hand or wrist is it your right or left?
Oh, Gary, you just hit the nail on the head. It's my left wrist and my left shoe.
Okay, this is getting more interesting.
Oh, I never even thought of that. Very interesting. It's noticeable that my left steel toe of my left boot really spins the compass around. The right steel toe reacts and pulls the compass towards it, but it doesn't spin it. It's not as strong as the left shoe. Oh, that's interesting. One of my people in my chat room was mentioning you put your best foot forward when you stepped aboard the craft.
Oh, wow.
Who knows?
Well, it's getting more interesting now. See, we're finding things out we didn't even think about, huh?
Oh, you're kind of fleshing this thing out for me. You're making me think, and you're putting dots together that I hadn't even thought of before.
Now, let's go one thing. What side do you wear your watch?
I have the watch that glowed is on my right wrist.
The opposite side.
The opposite side.
Oh, darn. I was hoping you'd be on the same side.
Yes, right. No, it was, and on my left wrist, I don't wear a watch at night. That's normally where I have my Apple Watch on my left wrist, but everyone knows when you have an Apple Watch, you have to take it off and charge it every night next to your bedstand. So I wasn't wearing anything on my left wrist that night, and that's where the equilateral triangle puncture marks showed up on the top of my right wrist.
Now, did you take a picture of those?
I did.
Well,
I have. You know me, Gary. I'm into content and to prove things, so I've got those. I've got photos that are pretty dramatic. I can send to you.
Well, I want to put one up on our gallery up on the website.
All right. I would appreciate that. Maybe someone else will see something similar that they've experienced as well.
Now, one other question I have. Did you have any strange headaches on that side of your body? I'm talking on your head or anything like that. Any like toothache or headache or anything like that? Or a problem with focus of your eye on that side of the body or anything like that? Numbness in your body on that side that morning or anything?
Yeah. Good point. I don't recall anything anomalous like that. I don't normally get headaches as well, kind of like Lee Strauss, our cameraman, but he experienced the massive headache after that flare-up and flash from that UFO at ECETI Ranch, but I don't recall myself having any. Matter of fact, you know what I do recall is being very relieved that I was able to sleep with my CPAP machine that Monday night, August 27th, because I had not been able to catch up on a lot of sleep until that night, and I felt relatively rested in the morning, even though my machine tells me I only was able to use it for an hour and 50 minutes. So that's kind of strange right now, but I have heard that people who have been abducted, potentially aboard alien craft, have a kind of a feeling of euphoria or the fact that they feel pretty good afterwards. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, let alone what the heck might have happened when I was aboard the craft.
Well, what they do is, like, how can I say it, implant or remove, any of your brain image of what happened. And make you feel like when you get hypnotized, they'll tell you at the end of when you've been hypnotized that you will feel refreshed and renewed.
Exactly.
Well, the same thing,
Yeah.
if they zap you and download your brain or whatever they do to you, that's maybe one thing they put in there. They blank what happened to you, and then they kind of make you feel like, hey, you just took a whole bunch of meds. You feel good.
Yeah, I've heard of that as well. But there's one other post event issue that I haven't brought up, but I think it would be apropos if we have about 5 more minutes to
go
let
ahead.
you know.
Hey, I got to 9:30 before my server shuts off.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I will make it quick here, but it was not probably 2 weeks after the events at the incident at Mount Adams that my medications needed to be tweaked because of my recent bariatric surgery that I had on September 10th. That would have been about a week or so, 10 days after the Mount Adams incident, by the way. I went in for bariatric surgery to do the weight loss program. And about another 2 weeks after that, I had to go in the hospital because a rapid weight loss causes your medications to go out of whack. And I'm being weaned off my diabetic medications so quickly that I had a problem that I had to go in the hospital to get rehydrated with. But while I was in there, I actually got to talk with one of my nurses, a young woman, maybe in her 30s or so, about her paranormal and strange phenomena that she's experienced. And I noticed that she didn't wear a watch, and I asked her, do you have a problem wearing watches, and do equipment, crash when you're around? And I said, yeah. And she said, yes, of course, it happens to me all the time. And I said, same thing happens to me as well. So we were commiserating about that. And about an hour later, she comes into my room to check on me, and she's just kind of flabbergasted. She says, you'll never guess what the, those rolling computers that they have around the hospitals nowadays, that they move from room to room. She says, I was working on this computer right outside of your door, and all of a sudden it just froze up and stopped working. I can't even get access to it. So we thought that was strange. So she jumps on another computer, a rolling computer, and brings it in and starts working on it again. And about 30 minutes later, that one crashes and is unaccessible. It's got the thing on the screen, access, not access denied, but unaccessible, and it froze up. We kind of thought that was weird, but hey, it just kind of happens a lot sometimes around the hospital, I would imagine. Then she comes in about 2 hours later and runs into the room. She's all excited, and I'm going, what's going on now? And she says, the entire computer system, it's called EPIC, EPIC, at Swedish Hospital, went down hospital-wide in the facility that I was at Edmund Swedish Hospital. And we're just going, what are the coincidences of that? Not only that, a friend of mine springs me out of the hospital that night, a PhD nurse who runs the communication systems at Stevens Swedish, and drives me home. And she says, funny thing is that, the computer systems are down all over the hospital. We've been having to handwrite our notes, for the last half day here. But I just got word that the entire system statewide in the state of Washington for Swedish hospitals went down. And they don't know why yet, but they're working on it. I'm thinking, holy mackerel. It's either me, or maybe it's that nurse that I had, potentially, or maybe it's just two of us in the same room together. Who knows?
Or maybe it was you. But, it's strange. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, sometimes I wonder, I wonder if I was abducted. Like I said, I never gave it any thought to about 2 months ago. Never even thought about that was a possibility. But I do now. And then I started thinking really strongly about my wife with watches. And not just watches. I mean, even cell phones. Nothing lasts with her. But it's really strange that I just sometimes wonder if we've been abducted and then, that we end up going for a mate that maybe was pre-picked for us.
Oh, I've often thought of that myself, is that why did I hook up with my lovely ex-wife for 30 years? Why were we married for a period of time? How did we meet? There was other relationships that I had that I thought were probably going to be my lifelong relationship that just never worked out for some strange reason. Yeah, I've always wondered about that.
Well, I do, especially because, how many people do you know that can put a watch on and it stops? In a day or two or three. It's just something in her body. I can't see a human body doing that. I don't.
Well, and I wonder whether your wife's mother or father or grandparents or those kinds of things had anomalous activity in their lives as well, because we've all heard of the issue of these things being tracked genetically through family lines, and even abduction stories that people in family lines are abducted down generations. So you never know what kind of family history she has.
I don't, and that's something. Of course, my wife is not into the paranormal. So, the only thing is she gets upset because, again, she can't wear a watch. When you buy her a pendant with a clock in it and she wears it around her neck, 2-3 days, that stops. Anything with a clock in it stops. And it's strange. And she has problems with cell phones working right when she uses them. It's just, you never know. I just wonder, like I said, maybe she was abducted at one point when she was younger, doesn't remember about it. Maybe I was abducted. Maybe we were thrown together for some reason. We've had 8 kids, and it's been a rough, strange ride.
Have you had any indications from any of your children that they've had anomalies happen to them?
But some of the stories about some of my kids. I can honestly say that it's different. It's not a normal family and such, and I can't understand why. I grew up in a completely different time. Leave it to Beaver time frame, and that's right. Again, before we get out of here, like I was trying to explain to Charles last night, people talk about aliens being lovable and caring and towards humanity. I don't know if I believe that or not, because let's look at this. You're roughly my age. You grew up in my age. Haven't you seen a big change at how people treat people from when you were a kid to nowadays?
Oh, yeah. There's much more distractions nowadays, much more difficulty in making a living. Let's face it. $1950 went a lot farther than a dollar bill does nowadays. So there's a lot more pressure on people, I believe.
Well, not just that. When I grew up, we knew the neighbors we lived in Seattle, and we knew, a block in Seattle was a long block. We knew every neighbor on both sides for a block and a half going down from our house. We knew them. And, if somebody had a problem, my mom or dad would help them. If it was food, like if somebody lost their job or it ended up in the hospital and they couldn't work, all the neighbors would chip in, bring food, help them. If somebody was working on their house and, or having problems fixing something, guess what? One of the neighbors up and down the street, they would help. Or older people needed their grass cut. We didn't ask for money. We went and cut their grass because that's what we were. People don't do that anymore. Now, we talk about like in the 50s when I grew up, 60s. Let's go back to the 1900s. People were more, they were savage in one way, but they were still, the family side was more caring. And it seems like that is being lost Now, my point is I'm making a civilization